Will Smith's hands started shaking, not a little tremor. Full shaking, the kind you can't control, the kind that happens when someone shows you proof of who you used to be before the world broke you. He was sitting on the Tonight Show couch, mid-interview, talking about his new movie. Everything going smoothly, polished, controlled, redemption in progress. Then Marcus Johnson walked onto the stage carrying a photo album, and Will saw the cover, Fresh Prince, 1990, written in faded marker. Will's voice cut off mid-sentence. His hand went to his mouth. And when Marcus opened that album to the first page, Will Smith, megastar, icon, man who'd spent 2 years rebuilding his image, broke completely. Tears streaming, shoulders shaking, unable to speak, because he was looking at himself at 21 years old. Neon shirt, flat top hair, terrified eyes trying to look confident. "That's me," Will whispered. "God, I was just a kid." 2 minutes, 14 seconds earlier. "Will, we have someone here who knew you way back at the beginning," Jimmy Fallon said, that talk show smile suggesting something heartwarming was coming. "Someone from Fresh Prince. He's been holding on to something for 33 years, and tonight he wants to share it with you." Will's face changed. Confusion flickered across it. Then curiosity. Then something vulnerable. He wasn't expecting this. This wasn't in the pre-interview notes. Marcus Johnson walked onto the stage, 63 years old, regular guy. Nothing special about him except he was carrying a photo album like it was precious cargo. Will stood up automatically, extending his hand, clearly not recognizing him. "Hi, I'm Will," he said, the way he always did, polite, professional. "It's Marcus," the man said quietly. "From the Fresh Prince set, 1990, I was a set assistant. You probably don't remember me." But Will did remember. Not the name, not the face. But something clicked. "You were there," Will said slowly. "First season." "I took photos," Marcus said. He held up the album. "I kept them all these years. I thought maybe you'd want to see who you were back then." But nobody in Studio 6B knew why this mattered yet. Nobody knew that Will Smith had spent 2 years in exile after March 27, 2022. After the Oscars. After the slap heard around the world. After going from beloved icon to cautionary tale in one moment of lost control. March 27, 2022. Will Smith walked on stage at the Academy Awards and slapped Chris Rock. The world watched. The internet exploded. And overnight, decades of goodwill evaporated. Will went from America's dad to someone people didn't recognize. The scrutiny was endless, the judgment brutal, the shame suffocating. For 2 years, Will worked to rebuild, apologized publicly, stepped away, reflected, did therapy, grew, did the work that nobody sees but everyone expects. Slowly, carefully, he earned back some trust. By October 2023, he was promoting a new movie, doing interviews again, showing the world he'd learned that he was more than his worst moment. But redemption is complicated. It's not just about convincing others you've changed. It's about believing it yourself. It's about looking in the mirror and seeing not just who you became after you fell, but who you were before everything went wrong. And Marcus Johnson, retired set assistant, 63 years old, nobody famous, was about to give Will something he didn't know he needed. Proof that struggling wasn't new, that being human wasn't failure, that the scared kid he'd been at 21 was the same person sitting on this couch at 55, still trying, still learning, still worthy. Marcus had been there at the beginning. September 10th, 1990. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, first day of filming. He'd watched a terrified 21-year-old rapper from West Philadelphia walk onto a soundstage and realize he had no idea how to act. Will had been famous as a musician, had won Grammys, had fans, but acting? That was different. That required vulnerability Will wasn't sure he possessed. That first day, Will showed up 3 hours early, so nervous he was shaking. He'd memorized everyone's lines, not just his own, because he was terrified of making mistakes. Marcus remembered finding Will in the bathroom, throwing up from nerves. Will was sitting on the floor, trying to breathe, looking like he wanted to disappear. "I can't do this," Will said when he saw Marcus. "I'm gonna ruin everything. I'm just a rapper. I'm not an actor. Marcus had said something simple that day. Nobody knows what they're doing on day one. The difference is whether you quit or keep showing up. Will had looked at him with red eyes and asked, "What if I keep showing up and I still fail?" Marcus had smiled. "Then you fail while trying. That's the only kind of failing that matters." Will had walked back onto that set, did his scenes, messed up most of them, and came back the next day, and the next. For weeks, Will struggled, overacted everything because he was terrified of being invisible, anticipated every line because he couldn't relax, tried so hard to be good that he forgot to be real. But slowly, with James Avery's patient mentoring and the cast's support, Will started to understand acting wasn't about being perfect, it was about being truthfully imperfect. It was about being human on camera. And Marcus took photos. Nothing professional. Just candid moments with a cheap camera he kept in his bag. Will laughing with the cast. Will sitting alone between takes, looking overwhelmed. Will hugging James Avery after the famous crying scene in episode 6. 47 photos total, a time capsule of transformation. For 33 years, Marcus kept those photos private. Never sold them, never posted them online, just kept them in an album in his garage. But in March 2022, Marcus watched Will lose control on live television, watched the world turn on him, watched Will disappear for months, ashamed and broken. And Marcus thought about those photos, about the 21-year-old kid who'd been so scared of failing, who'd worked so hard to be good enough, who'd always been human, even when the world wanted him to be perfect. Maybe Will needed to see those photos. Maybe redemption wasn't just about moving forward. Maybe it was about remembering who you were at the beginning, when failure and fear were just part of learning. So Marcus contacted The Tonight Show. 3 weeks later, they said yes. Tonight was the night. Nobody knew what was about to happen. Will sat back down. Marcus sat beside him. The album rested between them like something sacred. Studio 6B went quiet. The audience leaned forward. Even Jimmy sensed this wasn't a light moment anymore. This was something else. Marcus opened the album. First page, September 10th, 1990, Will's first day on the Fresh Prince set. The photo showed a 21-year-old Will Smith in a bright neon shirt, his hair flat-topped perfectly, his face young and trying so hard to look confident. But his eyes looked terrified, like a kid pretending to be ready for something he absolutely wasn't ready for. Will made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. Something caught between nostalgia and pain. His hand went to his mouth. "Oh my God," he whispered. "That's me. I was so young. I was just a baby." "You were scared," Marcus said gently. "You threw up that first day, in the bathroom. You told me you didn't think you could do it." Will closed his eyes, the memory flooding back. That bathroom, the terror, the certainty that he was about to fail in front of everyone. When he opened his eyes, tears were already falling. "I remember," he said quietly. "I was terrified. I'd never acted before. I didn't know what I was doing. I just kept thinking, everyone's going to realize I'm a fraud. They're going to fire me. I'm going to lose everything." Marcus turned the page. Photo 2, Will with the entire cast, all of them laughing at something off camera. Will looked more relaxed in this one, surrounded by people who would become his television family. "This was week 2, Marcus said. "You were starting to fit in." Will stared at the photo. "That's Corinne," he said, pointing, "and Alfonso, and Tatiana, and..." His finger stopped on James Avery, the man who played Uncle Phil. "James," Will said, his voice breaking completely. He couldn't continue. Marcus understood. James Avery had died in 2013. Will had carried that loss for years, never quite processing how much James had meant to him, how much James had taught him about vulnerability and craft and being real on camera. Marcus turned to photo 7. Will sitting alone on the mansion, steps between takes, script in hand, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. "This was after you messed up 17 takes in a row," Marcus said quietly. "You were so hard on yourself." "I remember that day," Will said. "I thought they were going to replace me. I called my mom that night, crying, told her I'd made a huge mistake, that I should quit and go back to music. He paused. She said, "Smith, don't quit. We show up, we do the work, and we get better." So I came back the next day. Marcus showed photo 15, Will and James Avery, in an intense moment, James's hand on Will's shoulder, both of them looking serious. "The crying scene," Will said, immediately recognizing it. "Episode 6. I couldn't do it. Couldn't cry on command. James pulled me aside and told me to stop performing and just be human, to think about something real that hurt me." "What did you think about?" Marcus asked. Will's voice was barely audible. "My dad. My real dad. He left when I was young. I thought about what it felt like to be abandoned. And the tears just came." He looked at the photo for a long moment. "That was the day I learned what acting really was. It wasn't about pretending, it was about remembering, about being brave enough to hurt in front of people." Marcus turned to photo 23. Will, sitting in a corner of the set, head in his hands, clearly overwhelmed. "I took this one without you knowing," Marcus admitted. "You'd just gotten hard notes from the director. You looked like you wanted to disappear." Will stared at the image, at his 21-year-old self, alone and struggling, thinking nobody saw him breaking. "I did want to disappear," he said softly. "I felt like I was drowning, like everyone could see I didn't belong there." He looked at Marcus. "Why did you keep this one? It's not flattering." "Because it's true," Marcus said. "Because this is what growth looks like, not the success, the struggle, you sitting there overwhelmed and then getting up and trying again anyway. That's the part people need to see. That's the part you needed to remember." "Why did you keep these?" Will asked, his voice barely audible. "Why did you wait 33 years to show me?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "Because I think you forgot. I think the world made you forget. They made you into this thing, this icon, this perfect image. And when you weren't perfect, when you made a mistake, they destroyed you for it. But these photos, they're proof that you were never perfect. You were always human. You were always struggling. And that was okay. That was beautiful. Watching you struggle and keep going, that's what made you who you are." Will broke completely. He put his face in his hands and sobbed. Not performance crying, not polite emotional tears, real, deep, guttural crying, the kind that comes from somewhere you can't control, the kind that happens when someone shows you grace you didn't know you needed. The audience didn't know what to do. Some cried with him. Others sat in stunned silence. Jimmy Fallon had tears running down his face. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't a talk show moment. This was something raw and real. When Will finally looked up, his face was red and wet and completely unguarded. "I spent 2 years thinking I'd destroyed everything," he said, his voice breaking. "Thinking that one moment defined me, that I'd become this terrible person, and I've been trying so hard to prove I'm not that, to show everyone I've changed. But looking at these photos, seeing who I was at the beginning, I realized I wasn't trying to become someone different. I was trying to remember who I always was. Just a person. Just a human being who makes mistakes and keeps trying." Marcus nodded. "You didn't become someone terrible. You had a terrible moment. But you're still the same person who showed up scared on that set in 1990 and worked harder than anyone. You're still the person who treated crew members like family, who said thank you, who remembered names. That person didn't disappear. He's still here." Will looked at the photos again. The last one showed him on rap day of the first season, sitting on the mansion steps, exhausted but smiling. He looked proud. He looked like someone who'd survived something impossible. "Can I keep these?" Will asked quietly. "They're yours," Marcus said. "They always were." Jimmy Fallon finally found his voice. "Will, I think we need to take a break. Is that okay?" Will nodded, unable to speak. During the commercial break, he and Marcus talked quietly. About 1990. About being young and scared. About James Avery and learning vulnerability. About how the scariest thing wasn't failing, it was letting people see you fail. When they came back, Will addressed the cameras directly. His voice was still thick with emotion, but steady. "I don't usually do this," he said. I don't usually let people see me like this, but Marcus reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Being human isn't weakness. Struggling isn't failure. And redemption isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering you were always enough, even at the beginning when you didn't know what you were doing. He looked at Marcus. Thank you, not just for the photos, for remembering me, for seeing me as human when the world wanted me to be perfect. That's a gift I didn't know I needed. The audience gave them a standing ovation. Real applause, the kind that happens when people witness something true. The clip went viral within hours, millions of views, but the comments weren't about scandal or gossip. They were about grace, about second chances, about how we're all just humans trying our best. Will kept the photo album on his desk. When interviews got hard, when the scrutiny felt overwhelming, when he started to forget that he was human and not a brand, he'd look at that album, at his 21-year-old self, scared, imperfect, trying, surviving, and he'd remember, struggling isn't failure, making mistakes isn't the end, and redemption isn't about erasing your past. It's about accepting all of it, the fear, the failure, the triumphs, the mistakes, and choosing to keep showing up anyway. 3 months later, Will invited Marcus to his movie premiere. But more than that, Marcus became someone Will could call when the pressure got too heavy, when the performative redemption felt exhausting. Someone who remembered who Will was before fame, before success, before the fall. Because that's what the kid from West Philadelphia did in 1990. He showed up scared and stayed anyway. And 33 years later, when the world tried to decide he was unredeemable, a photo album reminded him, you were always human. You were always enough. You always have been. Studio 6B doesn't mark that moment officially, but everyone who was there remembers. The night Will Smith cried real tears. The night a photo album became forgiveness. The night the world learned that redemption isn't about perfection. It's about being brave enough to remember you were human all along.